Okay, I am told by Robin there are no public speakers. And a motion to approve the minutes.
I move that the minutes be adopted.
Thank you. A second in our wings?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I also read that there's one addition to the work plan this month, Tom?
That's correct. It's a safety presentation for 2010 results in 2011 safety initiatives for buses. Steve will have that, and there should be a copy on everybody's seat.
Yeah. Okay, Darrell, good morning.
Good morning, Nancy. Good morning to the committee. I'd like to open up the meeting by handing over to John Hine to go over the operations report. John?
Good morning. The performance highlights for the month of January 11 and the past 12 months are on pages 11 and 12 of the committee book. For the month of January, combined bus MDBF was down 18.3% compared to January of 10 levels. AM and PM pullouts as well as completed trips also declined from January 10. As you're all well aware, the data reflects the impact of the multiple storms in January. Over a 12-month period ending January of 11, combined MDBF fell by 3.4% compared to the prior 12-month period. AM and PM pullouts also fell by less than 1% and completed trips by 1.1%. I will turn it over to Steve Vidal for the safety.
Good morning. Our comments on December's customer and employee safety performance refer to the results listed on page 13. Later in the meeting, I'll present the review of the 2010 safety performance and the highlights of our 2011 program initiatives. I will begin by reporting that positive progress continues in 3 of the 5 safety categories. However, as I reported at February's meeting, the positive movement that had been realized in collisions was significantly impacted by December and January winter storms. With regard to evolving trends, the 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the 3 bus units is 4.2% worse as of December. It should be noted that all 3 bus agencies experienced decreases during December in the actual number of collisions, totaling 21 on a regional basis. This reduction was realized despite the December 2010 storms, during which there were 59 weather-related collisions, which was double the number from 2009. When looking at the rate of collisions, we would expect the trend to be similar to the trend in collision injuries. However, we are seeing significant spikes in collision injuries that are inconsistent with our collision rates. As noted at last month's meeting, the PTSB conducted a severity index analysis of multiple injury collisions that met their criteria and occurred between 2006 and 2010. Their analysis showed a noticeable increase in multiple injury cases statewide. However, their analysis also revealed that while many more passengers are claiming injuries, the average severity of injury is very low, meaning, and I quote from their report, that there are a substantial number of unobservable complaint of pain injuries rather than observable contusion, laceration, or broken or incapacitating type of injuries. Over the coming months, we will continue to monitor the developments surrounding this phenomenon. We will update the committee on the PTSB's efforts in this area as well as our own as additional information becomes available. The 12-month rate for both customer accidents and customer accident injuries are continuing to move steadily in the right direction on a regional basis since we addressed this issue back last March at the Chairman's request. To achieve this performance, we are supplementing the training initiatives and oversight controls that have been developed and implemented. Finally, on the 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents, now stands at 2.5% better than the 2009 level. It remains significantly better than where we were in January 2010 when we were 25% worse than previous year. I'd now like to introduce Tom Charles for paratransit report.
Before we do that, just out of curiosity,
Yep.
we don't have a January data? We're
No.
3 months behind on this data?
It's not right. We don't have the certified data yet for January. We actually have the raw numbers, so I can tell you where we trended.
Just more out of curiosity, everything else we have through January.
Right.
Safety data runs 1 month behind all the others, financial, et cetera. It's the same thing in the other agencies.
I can tell you that it's pretty ugly with all the weather-related accidents we had in
Sort of what I was
January.
asking is-
Yeah, it significantly impacted our performance in January.
Good morning. The paratransit report begins on page 15. For the month of January 2011, accessorized paratransit ridership decreased by 13.3% compared to January 2010 levels. Able ride ridership decreased 21.3% from January 2010. The severe weather encountered in January accounted for most of the drop in trip requests and ridership. Over the 12-month period ending January 2011, a 4.1% increase in accessorized requests for service led to a 3.8% increase in ridership. At Able Ride, a 11.6% decline in requests for service over the 12-month period resulted in a comparable 11.5% ridership decline. The prime reason for the year-to-date decline in Able Ride was the elimination of non-ADA trips implemented mid-year 2010. Favorable no-show trends were seen in the month of January as accessorized and Able Ride passenger no-shows declined by 7.4% and 18.2% respectively. At this time, in response to a request to update the committee on the progress made with regard to establishing the use of feeder and trip-by-trip planning for accessorized customers and other initiatives, I'd like to brief the committee on our efforts in these strategic areas. We're trying to see if we can get that up on the screen. It's a very brief 6 slides on the paratransit initiatives for 2010 and 2011.
I think we have it.
That's it. Okay, on slide 1. The operating costs were projected to increase by approximately $70 million per year in 2010 and in 2011. The trajectory showed a significant increase in the years 2010 and 2011. Next slide, please. As a result, in looking at our operations and determining where to address some of the cost reductions, in 2010 we were able to reduce by $47.9 million from the forecast, and for 2011 we project to reach an $80 million less than forecast. We found there were 3 areas of opportunities to reduce our costs: reducing the average cost per trip, adherence to ADA regulations, and integration of fixed route service into our paratransit trip itineraries. In reducing the average cost per trip, we of course continued with our increasing the use of car service, black car service, taxi, and livery, and we are projected to reach a 20% level. In 2010 we reached 11%. Most of the contract awards in September are still yet to realize full capacity, so in 2011 we expect to get an annual benefit and reach the 20%. Our AVLM system, GPS, is giving us vital real-time information to improve our scheduling and route optimizations of our trips, as well as improving the productivity of the scheduling system. We have the annualization of the rapid procurement outcomes contributing to our 2011 target, and with this short-term and expansion of car service, we're able to eliminate 2 of our most expensive accessorized carriers.
So Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just on that note, so what's the average? What's your expected average cost per trip now? I'm always fixated on that $60 number, and it seems like it's come down significantly as a result of these things. Do you know offhand?
Yes, for the direct cost, it's come down to about $45 per trip, and indirect and direct, it's coming closer to the $50 range.
Thanks.
Adherence to ADA regulations, we're applying in a consistent manner the standards throughout all the assessment centers. With the feeder, we're able to concentrate and provide only those trips required by ADA and adhere to the three-quarter-mile fixed route corridors in implementing paratransit trip service.
Tom, what does that mean?
The three-quarter-mile fixed,
Yeah.
with our scheduling system now, we're able to determine what area, what geographic area we can service.
Right.
Since the MTA bus went into Yonkers, we had a broader area of Westchester. We're now able to fine-tune that and bring that in line to a three-quarter-mile corridor, as well as implement our extreme weather when we have the weather temperatures reaching a certain degree, exacerbating medical conditions.
Right, that I remember, right.
What does that mean for the passenger, though, for the customer? This
In-
three-quarter of a mile. So if you're home and you're within three-quarters of a mile of a subway line or a bus, you can take paratransit to that station?
That would be part of the feeder. This responds to if you request an origin and a destination. That's the primary ADA requirement, origin to destination, that the origin and destination have to be within the service area.
There's nothing
And
to
the service area is defined by the fixed route and three-quarter-mile corridors around those fixed routes.
Okay.
Were we providing service to a lot of folks outside of those?
When we were into Westchester and addressing the Yonkers bus line, there was
So it's probably a small.
small, but it was something we worked on with our scheduling to fine-tune.
Consistent application of assessment standards, that's the doctors?
No,
the
that's-
assessments of...
When we went to 100% in-person assessments,
Right.
we were able to free up our own staff to go out to those sites. After doing some training of all the assessment center personnel, our personnel reinforced the training, tried to get consistency. Any areas that were not in black and white, we were able to discuss and determine what was the intent of ADA regulations.
So as a percent of applications coming in, has there been an increase in the amount that are being rejected?
Yes, we've almost doubled the number of denials.
And what is the denial rate now?
Now it's roughly about 13%, where previously we were at 6%. And the final area, integration of fixed route service into paratransit trips. With our trip-by-trip eligibility, where we would find a fixed route service that would satisfy the origin to destination requirement of the customer. We expect 3% of those trips to be accomplished entirely through fixed route with no need for the paratransit service. And for our feeder program, we will be expanding, and we project 7.5% of our trips will have an itinerary where we'll bring them to a bus stop, and the bus stop the bus line will bring them to their destination.
So how do you determine, the first one, how do you increase just fixed route?
When the customer calls in and gives us the origin to destination, the software now, which is...
We'll show you a handicap accessible to a handicap accessible.
Correct. Well, we're using the buses right now. Since they're 100% accessible,
Right.
we've only limited this rollout to buses only at this time. And so the software tells the reservationist that origin and destination can be serviced by the bus line
Right.
and not violate the person's medical restrictions.
And you're at 3% right now.
We're
Do you
projecting
expect that
to
to
get
get higher?
3% in 2011.
Almost sounds like it should be higher at some point.
Well, we're starting out with those customers that have distance-related conditional eligibilities. So if they're within 2 or 3 blocks of a bus stop, that's our first target.
And have we coupled it with, and we've talked about this a while ago, that we have a program, like a training program, to get people to use the fixed route and to use the buses, and what are we doing to increase promotion of that? Because I think in general, most folks that would like to use the system, I mean, they're being forced to use the system because of health concerns and related, but if they could use the system and they knew there was a training course, that would be helpful.
Yes, that was the travel training contract they recently approved with CP of New York.
Okay.
And we have a kickoff meeting next week with them, and we will begin travel training to a larger percentage.
Tom, if a person could take, are there any ADA requirements that say it has to be point-to-point bus service, or it has to be accomplished within X number of transfers, or how does that?
No, it requires that we just recognize their medical restriction and help them with getting from origin to destination. When you do talk about multiple transfers, then you are starting to look at fatigue and stamina with their medical condition, so you have to make some acknowledgement.
And how about length of the bus trip versus?
Yes, we try to, the ride time allowances that we have to adhere to were predicated on the fixed route travel distances. So that's still in play, and in fact should help us meet that ride time allowance.
Thank you.
How are participants getting information on the feeder service? Are people open to it? Is their first reaction, is this ridiculous? I mean, what sort of outreach are we doing?
Our outreach, we go out to various centers. We've sent our newsletter and letters. But when the customer initially gets that from the call at the reservations that their itinerary is changing, right now for every two, we're seeing one that accepts and one that doesn't.
And what happens when they don't accept?
If it's a fixed route, that's the only way they'll be able to travel. We can't provide. It's not an ADA trip.
So I'm sorry, I just want to understand what you meant by that. So for every two, one accepts, one doesn't accept.
Right. If they refuse,
yeah,
we're not obligated to provide them a trip.
So then what happens?
They make their own way or don't take the trip. It's basically we're not violating the ADA requirement.
Right. Okay. So those when you let them know, 50% of them actually are no longer using the service as a result.
Well, that specific trip that they asked for, we have found out some try to change their origin and destination. We're looking at that and heading that off, but it's really their specific trip request. They may still ask for other trips that have origins that don't and destinations that are not satisfied by fixed route. All right, and that concludes the update.
Thank you, Tom.
I also just want to bring to your attention, I misspoke at the last session about the purchase of the MV1 vehicle, an accessible built vehicle. I believe that's a procurement item that you'll be seeing. And we have on display an MV1 outside in front of the building. We are looking to purchase 3 for test and evaluation. Now, Tom DeSobo.
Okay. I'll begin with the ridership report that's on page 14 of the committee book. For the month of January 2011, weekday ridership was down substantially from January 2010 levels across all 3 bus agencies. No surprise due to the multiple snowstorms and the residual impact on bus travel in the days following those significant snowfalls. For New York City Transit Bus, we were down 11.4. For MTA Bus, we were down 8.2, and Long Island Bus 8.3. We found that we had positive growth in January on weekends in MTA and Long Island Buses. 2011 data reflected increases of 1.9 for MTA Bus and 4.6% for Long Island Bus. However, January weekend ridership fell by 4.5% in New York City Transit Bus. On weekdays, express bus ridership continued to fall at New York City Transit and MTA Bus by 6.4 and 8.9% respectively. We took an early look at February results for ridership on weekdays, and we actually showed gains of 2.9% for MTA Bus and 4.7% in February for Long Island Bus, and a very slight decrease of 0.3% for New York City Transit Bus. With regard to the revenue and expense report that's summarized on page 16, January 2011 farebox revenues were down across the board when compared to the adopted budget. While MTA Bus was 1.6% below budget, Long Island Bus was 8.4% worse in farebox revenue, and New York City Transit Bus was 8.8% worse than budget in January. With regard to January 2011 non-reimbursable accrued expenses, we had some favorable variances for each agency. MTA Bus, Long Island Bus, and New York City Transit Bus were below their January adopted budget levels by $200,000 for MTA bus, $700,000 for Long Island bus, and a whopping $17.7 million for Department of Buses. Most of that in buses was timing related. And that concludes the finance section.
Sounds like the less people we carry, the more money we don't lose.
Well, you know what? Cost recovery isn't 100%.
So most of those figures are storm-related. Is that
To some extent. I mean, there's overtime dimensions to the labor side, and there's also the early implementation of the BSC where payments and things like that, the accruals related to that, they'll show up in February and March results. Some of it's timing. On to procurements. Beginning on page 44, we have a total of 4 procurement actions, which total $2.3 million in proposed expenditures for approval this month. This includes 1 non-competitive procurement and 3 competitive actions. The non-competitive procurement, which Tom just referenced, is detailed on page 50, represents the purchase of 30 accessible vehicles called MV1 for test and evaluation and paratransit service.
I thought Tom said 3.
It's 30. It's 15 gas and 15 CNG powered.
That's these, yes?
Yes, that's what's outside. He might have. The MV1 is the first purpose-built accessible vehicle for both ambulatory and mobility-impaired passengers that is in compliance with ADA regulations, I should say requirements. There's also one competitive action I want to mention, which is a request for approval to issue an RFP for the procurement of 74 low-floor 40-foot CNG buses for the MTA bus fleet, which is outlined on the staff summary on page 51. This procurement will be funded through a federal State of Good Repair grant. I will now ask... Sure.
Question about that one, Tom. We're still buying CNG buses? I mean, I thought, years ago we were told that was an interim technology and people didn't want the fueling depots in their areas and everything. We're still going? We've got so much later technology and we're still going back with some CNGs?
Yes, I mean, we have 6 CNG depots across the 3 bus units, 2 in buses, 2 in MTA bus, and obviously both in Long Island bus. As for technical comments,
We're just maintaining the depots that we have now. We're not expanding it. We're replacing buses in those depots that are over the age.
basically filling the capacity of what the 6 call for in terms of bus service, but we're not expanding beyond
why,
that.
for instance, would you go and buy more CNGs and not convert to hybrid electrics or something of that nature?
Because the original capital expense to convert the depot over to CNG, the fueling station, and all the expenses occurred during the original startup.
Where is Spring Creek, excuse me for asking?
It's the old command in the sort of Gateway Plaza section of Brooklyn off the Belt Parkway.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah, a little further down.
The MV1s. I've been, as Tom knows, I think we should do a lot more of these sedan-like vehicles and spending on the big buses. I have also always questioned, maybe I've gotten it, about why we own them all, but I guess I get that. The one concern I have is we're testing these 15 gasoline and 15 CNGs. I find it hard to believe that these guys wouldn't be giving us these vehicles to test out. The fact that we've got to spend $1.5 million for a vehicle that we don't know if we're going to use sounds like a pretty crappy deal, frankly. Not saying you didn't give it to them, but these guys should have been a lot more generous in having us test out the vehicles when, in fact, we could be buying hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of these over a time period. So I'm just not comfortable paying over $1.5 million for these vehicles when they're untested. Hopefully they work, and hopefully they work to the benefit of the MTA. But I'm just not comfortable spending that much money on this. These guys should have, frankly, been giving us a much, much better deal. Yeah,
Jeff,
absolutely.
So you don't mean a better deal on the cost of a new unit, you mean the trial?
Yeah, it's a trial period. Frankly, if we're a big enough organization that they should have at least thrown in a whole half a dozen of these.
We tried to, we worked on that very hard, and
I'm serious. I'm serious because when I was with the city, there were a number of electric vehicles that they wanted to test out. We got them for free because that's just good advertising. That's just good trial period. We're going to pay for 30 of these things, and we don't know if they're going to work. God, I hope they do. Everything I've heard, it's a very good company. But there's no way we should have had to pay retail price.
Several different bus technologies have given us a few loaner buses to try out. I recall those.
The buses that we usually get on loaner are for a short period of time, usually 30 to 60 days. We end up testing and evaluating those buses and buying them. We tried and we leveraged this organization as best we could in terms of trying to get them to provide these vehicles.
So twisted out in this thing. I'm very uncomfortable.
I have a-
It's a good program. We should be doing it.
Yeah, you of all people are the most passionate about this.
No, I have a question about the same vehicle. Is this a heavy duty version that we're getting, or has anybody? I mean, we're buying 30 vehicles, and the issue is, are they going to work well, and are we going to be able to maintain them in the environment? We know we're traditionally the heaviest. You know, we're heavy on our buses. We're hard on our vehicles. So, how is this? Are you confident this is going to work well in New York City in particular?
Yes.
Yeah, we're looking at it from a test and evaluation purpose, obviously, and the extent to which we looked at the standard warranties. We received an extended warranty on the body structure for 5 years, 175,000 miles.
How many years? I'm sorry, how many years?
5 years and 175,000 miles.
And that's
for the structure.
that's an extended warranty
For the structure, yeah.
for the structure. Usually, what do they give you?
I believe it's 3 years.
Oh, see, Jeff, you're getting a longer warranty. You're getting a longer warranty on these than they traditionally offer because of, well.
See, I just said on the sidebar to Darrell that maybe, because I do quite a bit of this in my other world, and maybe we should get a few for 30 days with an option to purchase. But Darrell's saying 3 won't give you enough of an indication if they hold up. It just seems like we should have some sort of trial.
We can certainly approach that.
Are they here right now, the people?
Well, they're downstairs.
Oh, okay. Well, should we bring them up?
We
You
had
want to bring them up? Bring it up?
Maybe we can get 10 years?
We had extensive discussions with the organization, leveraging the opportunity in terms of whether or not the vehicles would work here and what kind of a marketing platform that might present. There are a number of customers that are buying significantly higher volumes of this than we are.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And,
Like where? Different municipalities?
yeah, there's a National Joint Power Alliance that operates out of Georgia. They're ordering a few hundred of these. And at the end of the day, we went back and forth with that particular issue. Ordinarily, we were able to get loaner products, but in this particular case, we wanted to run them for an extended period of time to determine whether or not they were actually a viable opportunity there was a viable opportunity for us to replace the larger buses.
Were you able to even call a reference? Were you able to call?
Oh, absolutely. But you have to remember, these buses are not in production yet. In other words, there are 400 vehicles that will be produced before we receive ours. I mean, these are right off the production line. Potentially, we could be, yes.
No, Georgia's bigger than New York. Ay, ay, ay.
I'm going to defer. I'm going to withhold my vote. If that's okay.
Why aren't we checking all the gasoline models when they're $49,000 and the CNGs are $62,000? Well, why are we doing half and half anyway?
When we perform the life cycle cost analysis, the benefits from CNG for the 7-year useful life make the cost per mile much less than gasoline and the vehicles we have right now. It's also the first purpose-built vehicle, and it will certainly address some of the maintenance costs and time and effort we take with the current cutaways that have fabricated housing on top of them. So there were many benefits to this vehicle, and the cost and the life cycle show us that it will be a benefit to us. We feel it's roadworthy. We've been watching this vehicle for 3 or 4 years, and they're a major business now. They're into a major production.
I mean, I don't want to take 10 steps forward and 2 steps back. I'm into this, maybe not as much as Jeff Kay, but I'm into it. But I do understand buying a product that you can't even get a reference on. It's not like you can go call your counterpart in Orange County or something. And they won't even give us any test vehicles. I mean, would they at least humor us and give us a few for 30 days?
We can certainly explore that.
But I want to know, this is a committee here. It's not my committee, it's ours, and I want to know how everyone else is feeling. I don't want to hear everyone's opinion because we have 3 minutes left of the meeting. But generally, are you feeling that being petty here? I mean, how does the rest of the committee feel? Mitch, how about you?
I think Jeff has raised a very legitimate issue, one in which we should continue to negotiate with them, and if that means tabling this for a month and letting them know the concern of the committee and the board, then that's what we should do.
Okay, cool.
Let's do it that way.
Okay, now, so on the other two items, a motion?
The only issue I was going to raise on the other two, on the CNG buses, because there are federal funds, does that mean we cannot get a New York State requirement?
That's correct.
It. Yeah,
That's correct.
That's unfortunate.
I know.
I move the other two items.
Second?
There's 3 items.
There's 3 items.
Okay,
3 items.
the 3. Second, all in favor, aye, and then
I will leave this meeting and go downstairs and talk to these folks.
on the 20, it'd be less than a month by the time the next meeting because of that schedule change that I'll never figure out. Okay, now,
There were no other service changes or any other information items, so we're going to hand the floor to Steve Vidal for the safety presentation.
yep, you got a minute.
You got 3. That's a little fast. You got 3 minutes.
Okay.
Do you really 3 minutes, or you want to?
Go ahead.
All right. Put a lot into this. Thanks for this opportunity. I'd like to begin by bringing to your attention this handout that I gave out, which is the 2011 Customer Accident and Collision Reduction Program. I'll be speaking to many of the elements in this program during the presentation, but I'd like to make 2 points up front with regard to it. The first and most obvious is that when we develop the program elements, we focus on historical and seasonal trends while constantly looking for evolving trends. Secondly, and not as apparent to everyone, is while we are concentrating on operating environment and major accident categories, we're also focusing on accident performance of our individual operators as well as their operating behavior. We accomplish this through a systematic criterion-based evaluation and management process. This process begins with the selection of new hire bus operators and is carried through their initial training and the management of their performance during probation. Once operators have completed their probationary periods, we continue to evaluate their performance through objective analysis of their accident history and, just as importantly, their driving skills both in service and in various training settings. I'll elaborate on this later in my presentation. If you would like, you can follow along with the presentation, which has Safety in 2001 as its cover, and we can come back to the supplemental handout later if any questions arise. Let's begin by walking through our recent year's trends and how we plan to progress through the next years. As we can see, there are both some positive as well as challenging trends as enumerated on this slide. What we have advocated since all 3 bus entities consolidated under one consolidated management structure is, all things being equal, we should emulate the best practice that each bus agency has to offer. While the regional bus merger team has identified best practices from all 3 bus agencies, which have been adopted throughout, it is clear that when it came to advancing our safety programs, we needed to adopt the safety and training programs which were instituted at New York City Transit's Department of Buses over the past 15 years. This decision was bolstered by input from outside regulatory oversight agencies such as New York State Public Transportation Safety Board and the FTA, as well as from reviews conducted by New York City Transit's Office of System Safety and MTA's internal audits. The most dramatic example of how New York City's safety and training programs impacted safety performance can be seen by looking at the MTA bus performance over the past 5 years. In 2006, MTA Bus adopted New York City Transit's bus operator training program, and then in 2007, New York City Transit and MTA Bus consolidated, and beginning in 2008, all the elements of New York City Transit's customer safety programs were systematically installed at MTA Bus. It's interesting to note that the improvement in MTA Bus's safety performance was realized in such a short period of time. They accomplished in 3 years what it took us 10 years to do at New York City Transit. In 2009, LIB and training were merged with the already consolidated New York City Transit and MTA Bus. While dealing with smaller numbers, the eventual normalizing of statistics, we believe, will show similar results at Long Island Bus. Our focus on 2011 is and must be driving down our customer accidents and collisions. Every customer accident and collision we reduce lowers our exposure to customer and collision injuries. So let's talk about the performance management and accident reduction programs that have helped us accomplish this. To begin with, we build our safety programs on 4 cornerstones: strong communications, quality training, workforce understanding of our safety program elements, and checks and balances as program evolves on to the end results. Performance assessment is a key part of our continued improvement approach. In developing our performance management and action reduction programs, it's critical that they remain flexible and provide for the ability to respond timely to changing trends and conditions. For example, through scheduled undercover rides in our performance monitoring program, we carefully identify operators for monitoring and evaluation based upon criteria applied equitably to all bus operators. Concentrated safety observations and undercover rides are scheduled based upon emerging trends as well as seasonal operational concerns. Some actually result from more immediate issues identified along specific routes. Tailoring our accident reduction campaign can include a scheduled operations review at key intersections for red light violations or speed concerns along certain parts of a particular route. Both the performance management program and accident reduction programs deliver the flexibility to focus on individual operators' performance as well as safety concerns involving route and service conditions. In practical terms, and why these programs work for us, is that they provide the ability to keenly focus on the problematic aspects of a very large and demographically diverse fleet and workforce across all of our tours in a multi-county operating service area. I also thought it'd be useful for us to introduce an example of how these 4 cornerstones of our safety program are incorporated into the rollout of our recently implemented zero-tolerance cell phone policy. As we all know, over the past few years, there's been a proliferation of cell phone and personal electronic devices. Distracted driving resulting from the use of cell phones has received a great deal of attention nationwide, and rightfully so. Keeping our operators off their cell phones while operating our buses is an absolutely critical component of our 2011 accident reduction efforts. Toward this end, we developed and implemented a zero-tolerance policy across all bus agencies this January. The new policy comes on the heels of a 2-year enforcement effort, which resulted in over 600 cell phone violations. Unfortunately, this effort did not prove to be much of a deterrent. Once we decided it was imperative to adopt the zero-tolerance policy, several steps were involved in its successful implementation. We communicated the severity of this problem and our intent to enforce the zero-tolerance policy to our workforce, including their union leadership. We got the message out in a number of ways. A month prior to implementing the policy, Darrell set the tone with a letter, which was hand-delivered along with the official bulletin to all employees enumerating the seriousness of this issue and the potential consequences of noncompliance. At the same time, I hosted a series of meetings with all of our transportation managers to ensure a consistent application and rollout of the policy throughout the 3 bus agencies. Simultaneously, we launched a coordinated awareness campaign consisting of posters and depot shop gates. These are just 10 of the initial 25 zero-tolerance posters being displayed throughout our operating facilities. During the period between Darrell's communications and the intended implementation date of the zero-tolerance policy, we negotiated a comprehensive zero-tolerance agreement with our 6 unions representing all of our operators. This agreement not only acknowledged the need for having a zero-tolerance policy, but also established set penalties for noncompliance, which includes dismissal for multiple offenders. As operators are cycled through our training center annually and formal shop gates continue at our operating locations, compliance with this policy is being reinforced. Additionally, employees continue to be monitored in service through a series of safety initiatives, which include scheduled and unscheduled observation rides. Finally, we continue to carefully look at violations on a daily basis, as well as reviewing customer accidents and collision findings and trends, all with the purpose of assessing our performance to critique where and whenever necessary any aspect of this initiative. Implementing a zero-tolerance policy only addresses one aspect of our operational reality, but we need to recognize that it falls short of addressing the impact of cell phones and other personal electronic devices. The impact that they have on not only our drivers, but drivers we share the streets with and pedestrians as well. Although we have made a good start with what we control at the operator's seat and in our own domain, we need to do whatever we can to encourage more stringent laws designed to discourage distracted driving phenomena as well as promote awareness in the area. Just briefly, as you can see, there are more aspects to our accident reduction program, and a number are listed here. All these elements are integrated and work hand in glove to support and improve customer environment and mitigate collisions. As I mentioned earlier, each element is supportive of the next, and this approach includes tapping into internal regional bus and MTA-wide resources to support, provides for participation of represented labor as well as proven checks and balances, both for the program and its supporting elements, as well as the bus operator's behavior. Now, to cut this short, I know that Cheryl presented the lost time accident presentation at the last meeting. What I can say is we've evolved and migrated all of the buses activities that Cheryl addressed into MTA Bus and Long Island Bus. It's a slow process to change the culture, but we're moving in the same direction, so I won't want to delay everybody on that. So that's the end of my abbreviated presentation. Any questions? Yeah, I did. Thank you.
I just have a few questions, and I'll make it fast. First of all, zero tolerance means if a driver is caught texting or on his cell phone, he loses his job, he gets put on administrative leave, and goes to remedial classes. What happens to him or her?
The policy that we promulgated was that if a first offense could result in your dismissal. We informed everybody that that was our intent. And it brought all the unions to the bargaining table. And what we insisted on was having all 6 unions negotiate a policy so that we didn't have 6 different policies. You can have a zero tolerance policy, but if you don't collectively bargain it, it's subject to an arbitrator determining whether or not it was a balanced approach. So by having all 6 unions at the bargaining table, we actually got them all to agree in a 2-strike policy. The first strike is a 20-day suspension, and the 5 days without pay. In all the contracts, there's a 70-30 fine, so you could take a 20-day suspension at a fine, which is the equivalent of a little bit more than 5 days in the streets. Interestingly, all of the union leadership felt that that was not enough of a deterrent to have 20 days at a fine, that they felt they needed the impact to be in the pocket, and a week in the street was much more. It's about $1,500 of a fine for them to be in the street for a week. So that was the first strike is a 20-day suspension. 5 of them are served. The second strike, if it's less than 2 years, is dismissal, and if it's between 2 and 3 years, it's 30 days and 15 in the street. So in this agreement, the arbitrator can only rule with the exception of a dismissal. The arbitrator can only rule on the facts of whether or not a violation occurred. In the case of a dismissal, he can mitigate the dismissal based upon language that's in the contract for taking into account longevity and the overall good record of the operator. So I believe it's a home run and unprecedented to have 6 unions sit down and negotiate this. So now, and the message has been unbelievably well received. As Jeff was saying, I wish that we didn't implement this in January with all the snow, because I really think that it's going to drive our accident rate down dramatically. So we've got to get beyond the weather-related accidents, but we're seeing significant impact on the seriousness of our accidents, as well as I think overall we'll see a reduction in accidents.
Second question on page 3. Why are the goals for Long Island Bus so much more permissive than the other 2 agencies?
Hold on.
I'm looking at the 192 versus 1.28 and 0.96 and 1.76. I see that in 2010 there was a spike up, but in 2009...
Are you referring to the
2011 goals, the final column on the right?
Unfortunately, we haven't really normalized our Long Island Bus statistics yet. So the numbers that were being tracked prior to last year only included collisions or injuries that resulted in claims. So right now we're normalizing those numbers. I think that's a guess as to where it's going to end up. I think the numbers would probably be dramatically better than that, but we don't know yet until we really wear this thing out for 2 years. It is dramatically better than 2012 goal. Yeah, because it would be based upon actual performance in 2011.
See what happened. Any further questions? A motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?